Sonia broke the kiss first, and took a step back to gaze into Brian's intelligent blue eyes with a mocking smile. "You missed me, didn't you?" she asked, raising her right hand to pat his cheek in a fond gesture. Looking at the way they both stared at each other with their hands wrapped around each other's waist, an onlooker would think they were two people deeply in love with each other, and who had missed each other. Brian hadn't realized just how green her eyes were, until that moment as he gazed into her pair of compelling green eyes. She was a witch. A green-eyed witch with a beautiful smile. "More than I thought possible," Brian assured her with a crooked smile as he wrapped his right arm around her waist in a firm grip and pulled her closer to him as though he was embracing her. "I'm sure you have had enough fun for the day, we should leave now," he whispered for her ears only while using his left hand to tuck a stray strand of hair away from her face. Without pulling away from his tight grip, Sonia raised her hand to pat his chest and threw her head back, laughing happily as though he was saying something naughty. "You're so naughty, my love. Why don't you take me out to one of your favorite fun places? After that, we can do all the naughty things you want later," Sonia said in a somewhat loud voice so that everyone around them could hear her, and that way Brian would be unable to turn down her request. She knew that once they walked through Brian's doors he was likely going to switch back to his arrogant and annoying self, and she wasn't ready for any of that attitude yet. Sonia flashed Mia a smile of gratitude when she saw that Mia had picked up the luggage box and handbag which she had dropped earlier and was taking them to the car. "Well played," Brian mused as he watched her. It was obvious she wasn't only a talented writer, but also a very good actress. "Anything for you, my love," Brian said, waving at the cameras with a smile on his face as he led Sonia to the car. He held out the door for her to get inside before joining her. "Hello. You're Mia, right?" "I'm Sonia," Sonia said, placing her head between the two front seats so that she could have a proper look at Mia, who was now seated in the driver's seat. "I know who you are. But how come you know my name?" Mia asked with a surprised smile as she shook the hand which Sonia had extended to her. Sonia giggled at that. "I should at least know the name of the beautiful lady who works for my fiancé and puts up with his nonsense most of the time, shouldn't I?" Sonia asked, making Mia laugh out loud. L1T Lagoon witnessed the first publication of this chapter on N0 Velby 1N. "Of course, you should," Mia said, and quickly stifled her laughter when she spied Brian glaring at her from the corner of her eyes. She had just indirectly admitted that she was putting up with his nonsense. She quickly cleared her throat and asked, "So where are we going to?" "Home?" Mia was coming with them? Sonia wondered. "We?" "You don't live with him, do you?" "Of course not," Mia denied quickly. "Good. That means you don't have to drive us anywhere. I'm pretty sure you have more important things to do with your spare time instead of driving him around like his driver. It's not like he is shooting any movies at the moment, so you can leave," Sonia said, and Mia looked at Brian uncertainly, waiting for his permission. Although Brian didn't like that Sonia was giving his staff orders without first consulting him, as though she was his wife, but he also didn't want to get into such a minor argument with her yet, so he gave Mia a nod. It was best to allow her to win the small arguments, while he did his best to win the major ones instead. "You are free to leave," Brian said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, before getting out of the car to take the key from her. "Thank you. I hope to see more of you," Mia told Sonia with a wink before getting out of the car, and that earned her a glare from Brian. Hope to see more of who? He was going to have to talk to everyone who worked for him. None of them were permitted to like Sonia or serve her. She had come here without invitation, and as such, she was on her own. "You surely will," Sonia assured Mia with a confident smile before she walked away. Hearing the confidence in Sonia's tone, Brian snorted as he got into the driver's seat. He turned to look at Sonia, who was still comfortably seated at the back seat. "I thought I was playing the role of your fiancé, or am I getting the script mixed up?" he asked with a slightly raised brow. Sonia giggled as she said, "How I love a man with an excellent sense of humor." She got out of the back seat with her handbag and joined him at the front before taking off her sandals. After that she buckled her seatbelt and glanced at him. So? So what? Brian asked, wondering what the question was as he turned on the ignition and drove off, leaving the paparazzi behind. We are alone now, you are free to say whatever you want to say to me. Don't you have any questions for me? Sonia asked as she opened her handbag and took out her journal and a pen. Brian watched as she held the pen over the note like she was waiting for him to say something so she would write it down. He decided that he wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I don't. He had so many questions he wanted to ask, but he wasn't going to do it when she wanted him to. He wasn't going to let her call the shots. You don't? I'm very surprised you're not asking me anything or growling. What is the catch? Sonia asked, tapping the pen on the journal as she watched him with curious eyes. There is no catch. I have only decided to be a doting fiancé to you, Brian said, flashing her an easy smile. I'm glad you're here, by the way. Now I can worry less about you. Thanks for coming, Brian said with a toothy smile. Lucy's cheeks flushed a deep shade of red, and she was certain she was likely going to die of embarrassment before the end of the evening. How in heaven's name hadn't she guessed that she was still intact? Was she really that naive? Thankfully Tom's phone chose to ring at that moment, sparing them both the awkward silence that would have followed Tom's sexually implicit suggestion. Tom dropped his plate on the table and excused himself since he didn't know who the caller was and if it was business-related. Once he stepped outside he accepted the call. Hey Tom. It's Jazz. An excited feminine voice greeted from the other end of the line before he could say anything. Even if she hasn't mentioned her name, he would have guessed it was her from the way she talked. He had thought she sounded excited that morning because she had been exercising so she was breathless, but it seemed that was the way she always sounded. Chirpy. Oh. Hello. Tom greeted, not knowing what else he was expected to say to her now. Though he had flirted with her earlier on, for Lucy's benefit, he had no interest in her other than being temporary neighbors. I'm sorry I didn't call earlier as promised, I was caught up with something at work, she said apologetically. It's fine. I'm in the middle of something at the moment, could we talk tomorrow? Tom asked, wanting to return inside to Lucy. Sure. I just wanted you to call as promised so you could have my phone number too, that's all. Good night, Jazz said before hanging up. Once he returned inside, he noticed that Lucy was still seated exactly the same way he left her. The only difference was that she was now slowly chewing her pizza with a distant look in her eyes. That was Jazz, the neighbor we were talking with this morning, Tom informed Lucy, who reluctantly glanced up at him. Lucy was tempted to tell him he had been the one talking with her, not them, but wasn't what was important at the moment, so she gave him an awkward smile and just said, "Oh. Okay." She continued taking bite after bite from her pizza since that was the only thing she could do at this point. At least that would keep her busy. At the moment she really didn't know whether to be grateful that nothing had happened between them or to be embarrassed that she had been naive enough to think that something had happened or to be angry that he had led her to believe something had happened this whole time. Or perhaps he hadn't led her to believe anything. She had been the one making all the assumptions the whole time. She had been the one judging him unfairly when she was the drunk who had forgotten everything that had transpired between them. The dominating emotion at the moment was shame and guilt. She rushed to remind herself that even though there had been no penetration, he had made love to her with his tongue and fingers, so there was nothing to feel grateful for. It was the same thing. Well, almost the same thing, because now she was even more curious to know what penetration would feel like if his tongue and fingers had felt good. She really wished he had done it, and saved her all this stress and headache. She winced at her shameless thought. That wasn't what she was supposed to be thinking about at the moment. Why do you look that way? What are you thinking about? Are you sad that I didn't do it? Tom asked curiously, making her choke on the pizza she had just swallowed. Tom quickly poured some wine into one of the glasses and handed it to her. Once she sipped from it and calmed down a bit, she raised her head to look at Tom, who was still staring at her but had a mischievous smile on his face. What? She asked, wondering why he was smiling that way. Could he read her mind? She would kill herself if he so much as found out what she had been thinking. I'm still waiting for you to answer my question, he said, making it clear he expected an answer. Do you wish I had done it? He asked again, and this time Lucy's heart skipped a beat, and she swallowed nervously. I can't answer that, Lucy said without meeting his gaze, and Tom nodded. He hadn't expected her to answer anyway. This was Lucy after all. If she had answered, it would have been out of character. I guess that means you are conflicted, Tom said, trying hard not to smile. Do you believe in fate? He asked when she didn't say anything. Her brows pulled together. What? Tom smiled at her. Fate. I think maybe I'm fated to be your first lover. He paused to allow the words to sink in. Meanwhile, in another part of the country, Sonia narrowed her eyes at Brian suspiciously. She could tell that he was up to something, but she didn't know what it was. She was certain it wasn't something good, so she decided to stay on her toes and not let him get her unaware. Where are we going to? Sonia asked curiously, since he had been driving for a long time now since he picked her up from the airport. Why? Are you scared I'm going to take you somewhere far away, murder you and dump your body there? Brian asked, making her laugh. You have a very active imagination. Maybe you should start writing your own stories, Sonia said with a smile. I'm not scared. Just curious. S&G. It's one of my favorite clubs in the city, Brian lied. Although he had heard a lot of things concerning the club, which had a branch in almost every major city of the country, he had never been to any. Now he wanted to take her there to scare her off him before he would get the chance to invite Matt over. You mean Sodom and Gomorrah? That is your favorite club? Sonia asked, eyes blazing with curiosity. S&G was known to be a den of sin, as the biblical Sodom and Gomorrah were. All manner of evil took place down there, as it wasn't just a strippers' club, but also had an underground casino. Yeah. Good thing your dress is befitting for a club, Brian said with a smirk, looking her over with an unreadable expression in his eyes before returning his gaze to the road. Sonia smiled to herself as she took out her phone. She was glad to know that they at least had something in common. Sodom and Gomorrah just happened to be her favorite club too. What she most loved about the place was the hot strippers. From the smirk on his face, she could guess he thought she wasn't going to like the place, so she decided not to tell him it was her favorite club. He was in for a lot of surprises. What about your family? Do they know about our relationship? Brian asked after driving in silence for some time. My only family is my best friend, and she knows about you, Sonia said dismissively as she checked her message notifications on her Instagram and Twitter posts. Ah, they're asking for our couple photos, Sonia said as she took pictures of them both as he drove, and uploaded it on her Instagram page. Brian was very tempted to ask her if she would ever get tired of doing what she was doing, but he knew what her answer would be, so he focused on something more important. What about your family? I mean your biological family aside from your best friend. All dead. She said without emotion, making him turn to look at her with concern. He decided that her coldness had to be either because she hadn't been very close to her family or because she was living in denial. You weren't very close to them? Brian asked, and Sonia looked up from her phone. She cocked her head to one angle as she looked at him quizzically. You seem awfully curious about me right now, ain't you? I figured I need to know the basic things about you since you're playing the role of my fiancé, Brian said defensively, making sure she wasn't thinking he was interested in her or anything. You seem to be forgetting something, Sonia said with an amused smile as she played with the engagement ring on her finger. Which is? This isn't a movie, and I'm not an actress. I'm not playing the role of your fiancé. I am your fiancé. You proposed, remember? She asked, flashing the ring in front of him with a smile on her face, and I accepted. Brian sighed. It seemed like she had mental problems. What if she had killed her family? She seemed like the type, Brian thought. He would have to try and find out if she had any psychiatric condition. It would be an excuse to break off their engagement. He was trying to gather as many valid excuses as he could. Lucy's heart fluttered at his words. What was going on? Why was she suddenly feeling this way? This was Tom, her driver. Why were butterflies fluttering in her belly at his words? She shouldn't be reacting this way. She cleared her throat. Tom. How else would you explain the fact that we ended up becoming next-door neighbors, and I'm your driver? It has to be fate, right? Tom asked, cutting her off before she could say anything. All he wanted right now was to build the sexual tension between them and make her sexually aware of him. He wanted to make it clear to her that he wasn't going to be just her friend, and he wanted to make her desire him. He had no intention of being friend-zoned. It's just coincidence, Lucy said, not wanting to relate the whole thing to fate or allow him to start having ideas. Tom shook his head. Unfortunately, I'm not much of a believer in coincidence. So let's put it this way, since I was supposed to be the lucky man to expose you to the sinful pleasures of this world, how about we keep it that way? Tom asked, and Lucy almost swallowed her tongue in surprise. Lucy blinked at him. What way? She asked in a small voice, as though she was scared to even hear his answer. When you're ready to have sex again, I have to be the one. At least I should be compensated for having to sleep with a hard-on after satisfying your body, Tom said with a lazy shrug. What was happening between them right now? Was she dreaming? This had to be a dream. How had they made such a U-turn from being casual friends eating pizza to two adults talking about sex? You are pulling my legs, right? Lucy asked with a nervous smile, not knowing why she was reacting so slowly to everything he was saying. I'm not, Tom, and with a straight face. But we agreed to be friends. She reminded him. Doesn't change anything. We could always add benefits to the friendship. Plus, don't forget it's my right. I was the one supposed to do it, anyway. So let's just assume I postponed the date, he reminded her. No, you didn't postpone the date. You chose not to do it even when you knew you might not see me again after that day, Lucy countered. Hence I said assume. Fine then, let's just say I chose to leave it to fate because I believe in fate and Viola. Here we are today. Tom said with a satisfied smile that only deepened the crease on her brow. You are forgetting that you're my driver now. You weren't then, she reminded him. And I'm sure you won't be the first boss to be having sex with her driver, Tom countered, making her heart flutter again. What was going on? You have someone you like, she reminded him. Have you noticed something from all your responses so far? Tom asked with a crooked smile. What? You seem to be telling me all the reasons why we shouldn't. You haven't said you don't want us to do it. Is that to say you want us to? Tom asked with undisguised amusement in his smile. No. Lucy answered too quickly, making him cock his head to one side as he narrowed his eyes at her. No? He asked. Yes. No. I mean no. I don't want to have anything sexual with you, Lucy replied. Her heart was beating so fast that she was sure he could hear it. The right side of Tom's lips curved in a crooked smile as he looked at her. He was oddly enjoying himself. He hadn't planned to do any of this when he asked that they eat together. But seeing how flustered she looked right now, he was very impressed with himself. Who could have guessed that he had this in him? Are you sure about that? I can still remember how you begged me to kiss you the last time. So maybe you should think again before you answer, don't you think? Tom asked without taking his eyes off her. The more he spoke, the more lightheaded Lucy became, and the more her heart raced. She wanted him to leave. She needed some space to be alone so she could organize her thoughts and compose herself. This person right now wasn't her. I suppose you have forgotten all that happened between us. Perhaps I should rekindle your memory. No. Lucy half yelled as she quickly got up from her seat. No? You don't want to know how my tongue traced the curve from jaw down to your neck and from there descended to your cleavage? Or how you moaned when I sucked on your hard nipples? Should I tell you the number of times you screamed fuck as my hands played with your nipples and my tongue sucked your? Lucy felt her knees grow very weak and she knew she had to stop him now. Stop. Please stop. Please, Lucy pleaded as she lowered herself on her seat. Tom stood up from his seat and walked over to where she was seated. He lowered himself in front of her so that they would both be at the same eye level, and then slowly took off her glasses. After dropping the glasses on the space beside her, he placed a finger under her chin and raised her head so that she would meet his gaze. I'm not asking you to date me. I know you're not into relationships. I'm single at the moment, and so are you. So if the time comes that you need a man to warm your bed, that man should be me. Is that okay? He asked without breaking eye contact. Lucy swallowed nervously and nodded as though she was being hypnotized by his disturbingly intense hazel eyes. Good girl. I should allow you to get some rest. You look so flustered, Tom said as his eyes fell on her lips which were stained with pizza crumbs. He reached out with his thumb and brushed her lower lip in a sensual manner. Lucy's breath caught in her throat when she felt his hand on her lip. She couldn't understand how the dynamics of their relationship could have changed within a couple of minutes, all because he had confessed to not having sex with her. Tom's eyes lingered on her lips for a moment before he returned his gaze to her eyes and he noticed her eyes were swirling with confusion. Good night, Lou, Tom said and straightened up before he became too tempted to kiss her. Lucy couldn't find her voice, so she didn't bother to say anything. She simply nodded her head as she watched him pick up another piece of pizza. I will return your plate and wine glass tomorrow. Don't forget to think about what we just discussed, Tom added before heading for the door. Once they walked through the doors of the club, Sonia started moving her body to the rhythm of the music. She turned to look at Brian and noticed the confusion on his face as he looked around the club. Are you looking for someone? She asked curiously. No, let's get somewhere to sit, he said as he moved forward, but Sonia placed a hand on his arm to stop him. Let's go that way instead, I'd love to have a good view of the strippers. I hope you have a lot of cash on you? Or your debit card? She asked as she dragged him towards the VVIP area of the club where only the best of the best strippers performed. Have you been here before? You seem to know your way around, Brian observed, wondering how she knew where she was going. I've been to the branch at Hedden, not this one. I think all their clubs are structured in the same way, so you feel at home regardless of the branch you visit. I've never been to the VVIP wing before, that is why we are going there now, Sonia shrieked excitedly. What? She had been to Sodom and Gomorrah? Why hadn't she mentioned it in the car? How was this supposed to scare her if she was already familiar with the club? From all indications, it seemed like he had only brought her here to enjoy herself instead of scaring her off him. You haven't been here before, have you? Sonia asked as she led the way. I have, Brian lied. Sonia turned to look at him, and she could guess he wasn't telling the truth, but she chose not to comment on it. Good then. A uniformed man approached them to find out where they were going, and Sonia informed him they needed a VVIP room. He glanced at Brian. When he recognized Brian, he gave them a polite nod and led them to a private room. Sonia relaxed on the soft seat and crossed her legs. Get us your most expensive drinks, and bring us the best strippers you've got, Sonia ordered before the man excused them. Seeing the smile of contentment on her face, Brian could tell he had made a mistake by bringing her here. His initial plan had been to get many strippers around them and play with the ladies in front of Sonia, so she would see him for the irresponsible guy he was, and leave him alone. But seeing her request for strippers herself, he knew this was a mistake, and he was in for a very long night. Now he wished he hadn't left his phone in the car. Your card, please? Sonia said, extending her hand so he could hand her his credit card. She didn't want to start drinking or doing anything without being sure that he had his card or money with him. Brian reluctantly took out his wallet from the pocket of his trousers and extracted the debit card from it before handing it to Sonia. "Thank you, baby," she purred happily and leaned over to kiss him. "No one is watching us here." "You don't have to kiss me," Brian pointed out. She tut-tooted in disapproval. "You hurt my feelings, darling. I'm not an actor like you, so I don't live my life to entertain other people," she said with a sigh. Her eyes lit up when the door opened and two half-naked ladies walked in. The blonde one was carrying a bottle of wine and 2 wine glasses, and the brunette was carrying a small ice bucket. The blonde was very pretty. About 5 feet 6 inches and around 112 pounds. Her blonde hair was long and straight. She was wearing a tiny red bikini and heels. The bikini top, which barely covered her nipples, left her pink areolas exposed. Her breasts were round and full, and she had a round firm ass. The brunette, on the other hand, was wearing just a thang and heels. Her long dark brown hair flowing over her shoulders. Her tits were full and firm, and Sonia was willing to bet her last dime that they weren't natural. This chapter made its debut appearance via N0V3LB1N. "You sent for us?" the blonde asked in a sultry voice as she dropped the bottle of wine and glasses in front of them. Sonia grinned at them in satisfaction as her eyes trailed over their bodies. "Yes, we did." "What are your names?" she asked, looking from one to the other. "I'm Candy," the blonde said. "I'm Brandy," the brunette said. "Nice. I'm Sonia, and this is my fiancé Brian. I'm sure you know him." "He is an actor," Sonia said, and they smiled when they looked at Brian, who had a disinterested look on his face. "Sure, we know him. He looks even more handsome in person," Brandy said excitedly as her gaze traveled over Brian. Brian ignored them as he picked up a glass and poured himself some wine. If he had been alone at the club, maybe he would have enjoyed the company of the strippers. But being here with Sonia, he just wanted to drink and go home. "Your tits, are they natural?" Sonia asked Brandy curiously, making Brian's ears perk up. Brandy smiled as she looked down at her tits as though she had never seen them before. "No, they're not." "You want to touch them?" she asked, returning her gaze to Sonia, who bobbed her head. Brandy moved closer to Sonia, and Brian, who had been ignoring them, looked to see what Sonia was going to do. He watched in amazement as Sonia cupped Brandy's tits and squeezed them gently. "They're beautiful," Sonia said with a happy smile before turning to wink at Brian, who was staring at her. "My fiancé is in a bad mood, please make him feel better," Sonia said as she leaned back in her seat to watch the ladies work their magic on Brian. Tom had a grin on his face as he walked into his apartment. He had no idea what had gotten into him, but whatever it was, he hoped it remained long enough for him to win Lucy's heart. Brian had said if he succeeded in getting into her bed, and if he did a good job, then getting into her heart would be easy. He believed now that telling her the truth had been a good idea. He had noticed how the truth had ended up making her feel guilty and had also contributed to making her feel very vulnerable, which was exactly why she had been unable to reject him as she would have. Tom smirked when he remembered how flustered she had looked. Perhaps this was the way he was going to pull her 1 step forward and 2 steps backward stunt on her. Tom walked into the bedroom and stood in front of the dressing table where a mirror was positioned, before picking up a pack of contact lenses that he had brought with him to the house. He needed to practice how to fix it before the next day. He opened his YouTube app and started searching for videos that would show him easy ways to fix the lens. After trying for about 10 minutes, he finally got it right. He took a step back from the mirror and smiled when he saw how different he looked with blue eyes. He knew without a doubt that there was no way Lucy was going to be able to recognize him once he had the wig and beards in place. Lucy didn't bother to stand up. Her heart was still racing and her knees were still weak. Just what on earth had just happened? Did something possess Tom? Why was he confusing her? Sometimes he was a good guy, and at other times he acted like a bad boy. Just what was he? Lucy rubbed her eyes and tried to relax her body, which was still very tense, by breathing in and out through her mouth. She knew needed to talk to someone about what had just happened between her and her driver, else she feared her brain was going to explode. She picked up her phone, wanting to give Sonia a call, but quickly changed her mind. Knowing Sonia, she knew exactly what to expect from her. Sonia was going to be very excited about this new turn of events and start building castles in the air. Sonia would then start trying to look for ways to make her imaginary ship sail. Who else could she talk to aside from Sonia? Probably Lucas. Her twin brother was her male best friend, and maybe a male would better understand how Tom's mind was functioning at the moment. She picked up her glasses from the couch where Tom had dropped them and placed them on the table, before carrying the bottle of wine and the pizza box, which still contained about 6 pieces of pizza, to the refrigerator. Thanks to Tom, her appetite had completely vanished. After storing them in the refrigerator, she walked into her bedroom and sat down on her bed before dialing Lucas' line. Lucas was seated in his living room watching a soap opera with his fiancée when his phone started ringing. "I really hope it's not the hospital," Lucas said when Rachel stood up to get his phone, which was charging close to the television. "No. It's your twin," Rachel informed him as she handed the phone to him. "Hey. How are you?" Lucas asked immediately after he received her call. "I'm fine. Are you very busy at the moment?" "I could call back later," Lucy said apologetically. Being a medical doctor, she knew he was almost always busy, hence she tried not to call him often unless it was very important. "No, I'm not. I'm not on call tonight. Rachel is here with me. Do you want to say hi?" he asked, referring to his fiancée. As if he expected her to decline when he had just mentioned that she was there listening to their conversation, Lucy mused with an eye roll before saying, "Sure." During their high school days, Rachel had tried to come between her and Lucas, and even though she had forgiven Rachel for her brother's sake, she couldn't forget what Rachel had done, so their relationship was still strained. Lucas handed the phone to his fiancée. "Hey Lucy. It's so nice to hear from you," Rachel greeted in a very friendly tone. Lucy tried to sound friendly for the sake of Lucas, who she knew was trying hard to smoothen the relationship between his twin sister and the love of his life. "Same here. How has work been?" Lucy asked Rachel, who was a pharmacist. "Not bad at all. I hope you settled in all right. Maybe one of these days we will drive down to see how you're doing." "Maybe," Lucy said, hoping Rachel would hand the phone to Lucas now that they were done with the small talk. She wasn't really the type that enjoyed chit-chats, but Rachel seemed to enjoy doing that a lot even though they both weren't very close. "So what is Ludus like?" Rachel asked, wanting to continue the conversation. Lucy winced. "I'm sure you will find out when you eventually visit me. Do you mind handing the phone to my brother? I need to speak with him about something important," Lucy explained as politely as she could. "Oh. Sure then," Rachel said, and quickly returned the phone to Lucas, not before telling him that Lucy said she wanted to tell him something important. "Is everything okay?" Lucas asked in concern as he excused himself from Rachel. "Well, I need your opinion on something. It's about a female friend." "Sonia?" Lucas asked, since Sonia was the only female friend in Lucy's life. "No. You don't know her. She is the friend of my colleague here," Lucy lied, making Lucas frown. "Okay. What about your friend? Is she ill?" "No. It's not health-related. The thing is, she met this guy at a club, and then they were supposed to have a one-night stand. Now the guy happens to be her neighbor and driver at work, but according to the guy he didn't have sex with her because she was drunk and it was her first time." Lucas narrowed his eyes. "Neighbor and driver? How is that possible? Are you sure he is not stalking her?" "We don't think so. Although she thought so at first. But the thing is, he was living in the building before she moved in, so there is no way he was stalking her. So there is no way he is stalking her. And there is also no way he could have gotten a job in her company just to be her driver within 2 days that she started working there, right?" Lucy asked thoughtfully. "Wow. I think I know this your colleague's friend. Her name doesn't happen to be Lucinda Perry, does it? Lucas asked in amusement. It's not me. It's a friend's friend. Lucy said defensively, making Lucas chuckle. Oh. No longer a colleague's friend? Okay. I believe you. Go on. Lucy chose to ignore the sarcasm she could clearly hear in his tone. Well, now he says he has to be her first lover since he was the one who was supposed to do it the first time. Lucy couldn't help feeling foolish as she spoke. Okay. And what does this your friend's friend who sounds exactly like you think? Lucas asked, making Lucy grit her teeth. I said I'm not the one, she snapped at him. I didn't say you are the one either, did I? I only said she sounds a lot like you. So go on, what does she think? Lucas asked again curiously. Well, he is her driver, remember? Things will be awkward between them. Besides, he is interested in a relationship with someone else. And he has the attention of so many ladies. They are also neighbors, so it's going to be weird, Lucy said. Is that what she thinks? Are those the reasons she doesn't want to be with him? Or perhaps she is just scared of getting emotionally attached to him, so she is hiding behind those excuses? Lucas asked, making Lucy frown. No. She doesn't even like him that much, Lucy quickly corrected. So what could be the problem? I wonder why she chose to have a one-night stand with him in the first place. She didn't happen to tell you why, did she? Knowing that if she told him the truth about the birthday night he would figure out it was her, she decided not to. No, she didn't. I think the guy likes her, Lucas said after some time. He doesn't. I already told you that he likes someone else, Lucy reminded him. You sound like you know the guy in question personally. No, I don't. I'm just telling you what she said. So what do you think? Lucy asked impatiently. Lucas thought about it for a moment, and he had a feeling in his gut that the whole thing wasn't a mere coincidence, but he didn't know how else to explain it. Perhaps it was fate? He liked that the man whoever he was hadn't touched his sister while she was drunk. It showed he was a disciplined person, and if anyone was going to be with his sister, he'd rather it be someone like that. Well, I agree with him. If someone has to do it, then it can as well be him. He earned the right after all.